So assignment 5 has a DWG, and I revved it to R2 after I was reviewing the last year's model, and it had a little bump in here where when I drew it in SolidWorks I didn't remove all the material. So I was saying is that in the archives or on the YouTube channel for October 9th, 2018, you can see the process of drawing this whole thing. So we're going to cruise through this and focus a little bit more on the high-speed machining. Again, you're going to have to make the choice of what are the advantages, disadvantages. Try it, see it, run it. I've gotten spoiled enough that even if it was the same amount of time or took a little bit longer, I like the tool engagement, I like the tool wear, and if I make a few little tweaks to the settings, I'm pretty sure that I can get better tool life and more and be comparable on time. So we're going to import a DWG, but then I also want to deal with these layers by copying each of the sketches down, and I still haven't found a good explanation of the associative setting in our link parameters. When we're setting depths, I can do incremental to any one of these selections, but the associative just doesn't have a lot of explanation associated with it. So after you've downloaded it, let's see, this was, I'm going to go back to, wasn't my, oh, this is going to be DWG, so we have to pick up an AutoCAD, and so I'm picking up revision 2. It comes in with our shape. This is about, I think it was 10 inches around, so let's just do an entity analyze. So yeah, 10 inches on diameter, so pretty good size. We're not just going to throw this in the vise and start machining. In the beginner tutorial from Mastercam, they are actually showing it on kind of a rotary vertical vise fixture, which is still going to be a pretty good size fixture to hold on to, get in and out of the machine. So my preference would be to start with maybe, if I was saw cutting, what was the thickness again? So we're 2 inches on the thickness. I really wouldn't want to oversize this and have to remove that much material off the backside. We might take a skin cut to make sure that they're going to end up flat, but really having a lot of sacrificial material to hold on doesn't appeal to me. So in that case, I'm still leaning towards a square piece. If I'm saw cutting it, probably 11 inches by 11 inches, give a ½ inch on each side. If I've got a decent saw that's going to not cut trapezoids, then I might even go 10 1/4 just to have a little bit to clean up on each side. So if I'm clamping this to one of the fixture tables, then I'm going to need an area that in each corner that I can put a clamp while I'm machining the rest of the shape. All right, so to get started, I'm going to kind of rotate over into position, and we can go into the transform. And let's see, I need to tell this that I'm going to translate. And one of the things that I found useful, since this ellipse is made up of about a million little line segments, what amounts to very small segments, is in our selection method we can switch from automatic to chain, and that's going to force it to find everything in that level. So we're not going to see much of a difference in the circles, but when we come over to all of these kind of more complex shapes, we'll be able to pick those up. All right, so I'm going to translate the circle, and the first one we had 0.75 and 0.75, so this will be 1.5, and we need to end the selection, and I'm going to tell it to move this one, and we're going to go minus 1.5, and so that sends it down in Z for our direction. So part of the process, or the reason of doing this, is we will start working with some wireframes and some solids here in the next assignment. So visual, going from that just flat 2D and visualizing those depths and managing them yourself, now we can actually do something with them and work with them. All right, so I'm going to accept that one. I'll select it one more time in the selection, and this time it's going to be a copy. And if I go another 1.5 inches, then that's going to be 3 inches. So another 1/2 inch should send it to 2 inches. And then I can accept it. All right, same thing with our piece. We're going to have this go down 0.75. And I would like to see both levels. And I need to mention real quick the join. We're going to do join here in a little bit with the stock. But one of the things I don't like about join is that at every one of these instances, there's going to be a vertical line. Every vertical line is a branch. When you're making your selections, then it comes to that next segment. It sees that branch. Do you want to go in the same C-plane, or do you want to go down in the branch? All right, so I don't, not going to mess with those. Let's see, we want to do that as a move. And then I'm going to accept, pick it up one more time, and rotate over. Oh, I guess I sent it down twice. So this one I'll copy. So the downside is I have to kind of manage those depths and make sure I'm giving it the correct. Well, I thought it was there. Let's go ahead and minus. All right, one more. All right, and then the last one will be for the ellipse, and the ellipse is going to stay. And so this will be a copy as well, and goes to minus 0.75. All right, so in the wireframe, I don't have any vertical lines connecting my geometry, but I don't really need them. I want to have those visual, and then anything that comes up, if I were to do the analyze entity, so we got a few extra pieces of geometry because of the chain selection. I'm at minus 0.75, which is what I expect to see. If we come over, and I think I can do the, I'm going to do the F4, minus 0.75 on the interior. We can just kind of check those numbers, and if I go back to an Alt 3, then I can see each of those layers. And then, wrong one, Alt 7 to get back to the isometric view. So one of the things I also have to watch out for is the C-plane at the bottom. That can shift around, and if all of a sudden I'm having to change this this transform in Y instead of Z, then I'm either working from the right plane or the top plane. Somehow I've managed to shift that around. All right, so as far as the text in the center and creating that pocket, you can pick whatever you want to put in there. So we'll mess with that here in a little bit. So just in case, before I move off of the center, I'm going to create a point and put it right at the origin so that I have that available for our geometry. So there, notice that my point is kind of going a little different. So we go back to Alt 1. Oh, we are in this C-plane top. I was thinking front all of a sudden. All right, so that is where it's supposed to be. It's just it kind of was oriented in a different direction. All right, so for my levels, if I come over and I create a level 10, then this can be for the stock, and that's going to be current. We switch back over to the rectangle, and I do want to draw the stock in. And new position, we're going to anchor to the center. Said 11 by 11, and I'm going to lock those numbers in so that I can place it, and that shows up better on the screen than it does on mine. And we'll go ahead and accept. All right, so as far as reference, then I can go back over to the transform, And I probably wouldn't treat this as a join, but I wanted to illustrate. So this is going to -2 inches, and it connects the lines vertical in each of the corners. So visually, it may make more sense. It doesn't really help me when I start going through to make the chains to apply the geometry. Okay, so I'm going to accept that one, and then one more time to selection there, and then go to Alt-1. All right, so I mentioned a avoidance area. So if I clamp this down, one of the things I might want to do is just set aside some portion of the corner so that I can get our standard step clamps over into the corners, clamping the stock down to the tooling plate. And then maybe there would be a containment area that I could go in and relieve a little step so that I could switch those clamps to a lower position after we've started. So let's create one more level, and I'll give this my contain. Right, and so this becomes a wireframe. You're going to need at least 1 inch, so probably 1.5. And I don't know, not necessarily concerned. Well, yeah, 1.5 by, and we're going to go -1.5. That's a little better, so I can go into the corner. So I probably won't be able to get the tool to go completely around, but I'm also kind of expecting that I'm going to have to clamp 3 sides and then do a contour on 1/2, stop the machine, change the clamps, and then do a contour on the other half. All right, so if we are making 1 to about 10 of these, I don't mind changing the clamps. If we are making hundreds of these, I'm going to come up with a better method of fixturing this. All right, so I'm going to set my corner, and we'll go ahead and mirror those. So when I go into the transform and mirror, all right, so finding those, and we'll end the selection. This is going to be a copy, so across the y-axis, and then accept. And so those are overlapping just enough, having to do the multiple selections. So now I have corners, and those ended up at the base. I think that'll still work. So what shifted? I'm on the top plane, but my drawing level, no, my drawing level shifted. So, all right, I think I have enough geometry. We can draw in what we need. I'm going to say we still would put it on different levels so that I can identify just the pieces that I need when I need them. And we're going to switch over to the toolpath. So picking a machine, stay with our default. And for the first level, we're just going to remove this material down to the ellipse. So I need to get over into toolpaths. All right, so same thing we've been doing with the properties. Even though I'm not changing anything, I give it that cursory glance of, yeah, everything looks right. I'm not having to change anything. Go to the tool settings, give it a program number. We'll assign worn. Still going back and forth. We haven't modified the tool library yet, so I need to start building in some more realistic feeds and speeds with those tools for aluminum, for steel. So we'll see what that does. I don't really like going by hundreds and tens. And then if we want to select the material, we're back to the library and 6061. All right, so pretty much selecting this material. At some point, we'll look at the from material, in which case when we pick a material down here, those feeds and speeds are in reference to that database, and it will ignore the tool settings and look at those tools from the perspective of the material, so to speak. So our stock setup, then, we now have the ability to select corners, and when I go to the lower right, it will also include my Z depth. Right? Otherwise, I could pick all entities, and it would kind of find everything in that group. So at this point, I haven't changed off of 0, 0 yet, so we're going to have to do that one more time anyway. Yeah, so I do want my stock to be located off of the other corner. So one more transform. Everything should be turned on in the levels. Don't want to miss anything. We're going to move to origin and shift it. All right, and then I'll jump back over to home and clear the colors. All right, so that looks a little bit better. And when I come back to the stock now, since I didn't turn the display on, 11 by 11 by 2, but there's no shift, I should see a 5.5 inch by 5.5 inch shift. So when I reselect the corners and accept, now I have those shifts to center on the part. Okay, and then I can see the display. And we'll go back to Alt 1 so that little green line doesn't keep annoying me. Alright, so we put a lot of effort into probably more effort into the setup here, but we're going to take advantage of it with the dynamic mill and the area mill. Alright, so one of the things that is kind of a habit or is just a consistent habit is picking the stock. And if we have the stock fully defined, then we really, when we're setting up for that that initial operation, well, let's go ahead and get into it. Mill 2D high speed. Let's try the area mill, and let's see. Since I didn't break those, I think those are still going to be avoid regions. So a containment region would be, I want to use all of the stock, but I only want it to run this little pocket. And I didn't set that down 1/8 of an inch yet, so we may do that standard. But I could set the definition and then use containment to say just mill inside of this area. Or in the case of an avoidance, I don't want to go into the area around the ellipse, and I don't want to go in these areas where the clamps are. All right, and if I build this up and make it a little more geometric, a little more representative of what we're going for, then I could see clearances with the tool holders. Is my tool holder going to hit the clamp? Am I going to run into anything that I don't expect to? All right, so the machining region, we're going to stay inside, and I'm going to set an avoidance. So let's go ahead and we'll pick the one corner, and then I want to accept it and end the chain. It gave me a branch point, so which way is it going? Actually, I'm going to switch to C-plane and see if it got, I think it got more than I wanted there. Let's see if I can jump back to the levels real quick, and we'll just hide the stock. Alright, so advantage of being able to go into that level, the stock being overlapping a little bit there. Now when I pick, if I stay in the C-plane, so 3D is looking at it in all the axes. The construction plane should just be looking at it and going around. Alright, so start a new chain, and then start new chain 3 and 4, and then the next one would be to go into the arc. So actually I have 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 avoidance areas or regions, so we'll go ahead and accept that, and then that puts us into our mill. So let's go. I think we can stay with the 3/4 inch mill. Still kind of looking at if we're running this on the TM 4000 RPM. I don't know that I'm going to have the spindle load to be able to run this upwards of 30-40 inches a minute. So if we back it down 20 inches and I get that full engagement, then we'll kind of react at the machine, how much rigidity, how much chatter we're getting out of that tool. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. And then we're not doing any recutting yet, so we'll bypass the stock. The cut parameters are in climb. Now, 3/4 of an inch diameter, 3/4 of an inch deep. I know a couple of tools that will be able to do that in aluminum, but 45% of the diameter at 3375 for a max. A little more than I want to try. So minimum, we'll go down to maybe 40 thousandths and max of 100 thousandths. And then 5 thousandths to leave on the wall, and no stock to leave on the floor. Let's see, keep tool down within 500% of the tool diameter. Minimum step over between 0.05 and 0.1. All right, then we will do 0.5, 0.05. Okay, so no depth cuts, the trochoidal motion. We're going to do minimize the burial. All right, so we're going to get those extra moves, but we're also going to do a feed rate adjustment as it goes. So step over 10% initial loop, 30. We'll stay with the defaults and see what it gives us. But basically, it's going to load and unload, which is still going to be better than in a pocket, moving over and then loading directly into the next cut. So feed rate adjustment. So slowing down or speeding up. We'll come back to that one. Entry with the helix, radius of 1/4 inch, 2-degree plunge angle. Those all look pretty good. No breakthrough. And then we get to the linking parameters. So we have a retract of 0.25 absolute, feed plane of 100 thousandths absolute, top of stock 0 absolute. And then if I either go absolute or incremental, then I can just set the depth and pick any of these geometries on that minus 0.75 plane, and it will 1.25. Interesting. So I did something either told everything to go up. Okay, I'm not sure why it picked that depth. Let's get back into the toolpath. We'll try the depth one more time. Oh, incremental from, let's see, what start point? All right, so absolute minus 1.5. Okay, got the wrong one. One more time. Yep, I went too far. All right, so those numbers should be what match my expectations. So minus 0.75 works well when you pick the correct geometry. So I'm trying to think where the incremental came from that we got the 1.25. All right, so we'll regenerate our dirty operations. It's going to plunge in a couple of locations, and notice that it is avoiding the corners. All right, so since it has those couple of extra cuts, one of the things I might want to try, well, we could either duplicate this or we can come back to the toolpath and see if we can just switch over to an area mill. Whenever we switch these parameters to try and pick up, we do want to go back through and verify our numbers. So no depth cuts, trochoidal motion, transitions, linking parameters, everything looks okay. We'll see if that turns anything up, at least one operation. So it doesn't look like it made much of a change. Okay, so I was happy with that one. Oh, I didn't give it enough time. My patience was showing. All right. So the area mill is doing longer cuts and longer nibbles. And I'm going to switch it back one more time So apologize for jumping around here. I'm going to regenerate the dirty operation, let it catch up. Alright, so the area mill is doing more of that around the outside. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. We'll copy and paste so we can do the side by side. I'm going to switch it back to dynamic and then regenerate that operation. We'll see it. Let it catch up. Alright, so when they're kind of on top of each other, very hard to see, so we'll turn the display off. So this is kind of doing more of that nibbling as it goes around, where the other one is feeding in and trying to stay, what would that be, kind of like more in that spiral cut. This is going to have some interesting tool paths, tool marks on the base of the part. Alright, so if I find that the 100,000ths, it's pretty easy to go back in and say I want to bump this up to 200 or a quarter of an inch if I can find that the tool will take those cuts. We switch back over, switch those. I may decide that that tool path works better and that we have the containment. All right, so going to the next level, looking at these, I think I like the dynamic mill a little bit better. So we'll copy that one and paste, and then I'm going to come back. Now when I'm making these selections, the thing to watch out for is I have one checkbox, and the checkbox on the item number 2, I'm hiding that display. If I come up to the toolpath group and I have checkboxes on all of those little folders, I'm pretty much hiding the display, showing the display for all of them. All right, and then I would have to come back to just the one, turn the display on. So there's a lot of times where I'm doing those bulk kind of operations that I want everything to be picked that way, but then there's other times where we have to pay attention to it. All right, so the avoidance regions, mainly the reason I copied it is I did not want to go back and pick all of those items. So if I remember correctly, I did 5 at the last, so I can delete that chain and then right click and add, and the next level down is going to be the next chain. Notice its arrow. Now these didn't seem to mind too much. So with the dynamic mill, it may just be seeing the geometry. But this one, I kind of think I want to change the side on. It's changing all of them. Okay, we'll see what that does. I don't know that it has any effects. So, and regenerate. And give it a chance to do all of those fun calculations. Alright, so now we're nibbling to the next level, also getting to that geometry. Alright, so let's see, that went down. Nope, still managed to, oh, we're at the same level. So on the parameters, that visual feedback comes back to the linking parameters now, and on the depth, I'm looking for that next level down. I'll find something, and then I should see the -1.5. All right, so on this, the feed plane, if I were to switch to incremental, now this is where we make a conscious decision that I want to rapid negative into the part. If I have not removed that material and I run just this operation, that is going to be very bad. So yeah, it is conscious decision. So we're looking at 100,000ths above, and when I set the feed plane, go to the next one. We're going to see what that does for our geometry and regenerate the dirty operations. Alright, so what I'm expecting it to do is to rapid to 100,000ths, basically to -1.4, and then start whatever helix. See if I can identify it. Actually, if I picked the same one, I did just plunge it into the material. Alright, so we'll try the feed plane at -0.75 instead. And then if I want a little extra, we'll go to minus 6. So 100 thousandths above that face. All right, so make sure you're following the logic. You're following your own logic. I'm saving a little bit of time by having that rapid negative, but I'm also taking the risk that, as it feeds in, that one's still showing as a plunge. So we're gonna have to watch that simulation to see where it's picking that up at. I'm gonna check the entry motion, helix radius of 0 and a plunge angle of 0. That's interesting. So that would be why it's pretty much plunging. So let's go back up to the 0.25 radius and a plunge angle of 2. And I better check that on the other one that I copied it from. All right, we'll let it catch up. All right, so still feeding in, and set the clearance. All right, so I was expecting the feed to come down to. All right, so as we go through this process, we're basically selecting. Nope, it still didn't feed in. So I was trying to get to is where I avoid that helix making all those air passes before it starts actually cutting material. So this is an efficient way to get the tool engaged, but not for 3/4 of an inch. All right, so I'll come back to that one and see if I can identify it later. Turn the display off. All right, and so at this point, if I have 3/4 of an inch, I might just buzz off the corner. The consideration becomes, is this going to become a projectile? So one of the things I didn't do was split this at the quadrants so that I could run half of one side with the clamps and then flip over, change, stop the machine, change over the clamps to the other side and run the other half. Okay, so let's see what it's going to take to do that real quick. Under the wireframe, I want to break 2 pieces and a break position. Well, I'd like to pick up the quadrant, so I either need to draw a line or we're just going to get it close. And I don't think it liked being an isometric because I really didn't want to break it there. All right, so let's go ahead and Control Z. Let's see, what are the other trim to point, modify, break at intersection, and break at points. Points that lie on them. Well, we'll try that one. And I will go to the top view. See if we're getting close to having a couple of arcs there. Nope. Oh, jumped out of the wireframe. All right, what was the other one? I was kind of expecting to see it pick up one of the quadrants. Alright, so angle, axis offset. Know that we're 2 inches deep, so I don't want to get too creative there. I'm already chasing it. Alright, so if I do a midpoint method and come off of the point that I drew, Well, rather extend it and then accept it. Yeah, it did put it at one of the bases, so that's okay. I was thinking at the bottom though. Okay, since I didn't get an endpoint, well, and shift back, break to 2 pieces. Select I need to break. Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna like the circle there. Okay. So I managed to get the lower, picking the 2 sides. And I can delete that line as my construction line. Nope, I think I still have that one selected. Okay, so just the line. That looks better. All right, so moral of the story is pay attention to what you're grabbing on the screen there. So when I go to set this this geometry for the chain, I want to make sure that I am at this lowest level because the one above it is still going to be a full circle. So if I'm working in the top, I can see the half, but I have just as good a chance of it selecting the full circle. All right, so setting up my contour, back into the toolpaths. And this is going to be a partial. So we're picking a direction, and that will accept. Don't really need a second chain here. So I do want to just real quick make sure I'm cutting to the outsides. And then we'll stay with the 3/4 inch tool. Cut parameters, now let's, if we do this as a rough and a finish, since that's a 1/2 inch, but we're going to be doing full width, full depth cut at some point going into this geometry. If I don't get too aggressive on the cut, it should take it, but I think I'd still rather do it in 2 passes. So if we stay in computer and go to stock left on the walls of 5/1000ths, then the lead in, lead out. Let's see, we're open contour, so length of maybe, let's see, we left a 1/2 inch on the material. So yeah, that's going to have to be a little bit larger. So 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch on the 90 degree. Bring it over to the exit as well. And then the linking parameters still have the feed plane, and the depth goes to the full 2 inches. Oh, and that was from the selection. Okay, so absolute is picking at the -2, and incremental should be going to that geometry. All right, so feed in, feed off. If we did that in a couple of steps, we'd have to go back to our depth cuts and give it the 0.25 and go ahead and accept. All right, so since that would be going through the center of the part, all right, didn't quite want it to go that far. All right, so we're still back to working on that incremental move. All right, so top of stock, we have the feed plane is absolute at 200. And then if I shift the top of stock to that cut at the -1.5, and regenerate that. Alright, so I think that's the recipe. Alright, so it's rapiding down, we're off of the stock, and then make the pass, lift up, and pretty much it's that yellow line at 200 thousandths that I'm paying attention to. Alright, so that's what I needed to do with the helical on the second level of the dynamic. Alright, close enough. And then we'll paste it. Alright, so same parameters, same depths, except that we're going to turn the depth cuts off. We're going to go back to cut parameters and 0 to leave on the wall. And then I also want to bring in the wear for the control. All right, so when we hide that one, or just turn off the display for that one and regenerate, now I just have the one finish pass. All right, so I need to duplicate that and do the same thing on the other side for both of those. But I'll leave that one up to you. And the other one I want to try then real quick is on this finish contour. We're going to duplicate that one more time. I need a little more room on my screen, so I'm going to collapse up some of these folders. And we'll copy, paste, and set the parameters. All right. And when we set the depth, so back on the toolpath, the chain geometry, we're already at depth. I'm going to delete that one, add a new operation. We'll go around at the base. Now I didn't include radiuses, but even though those are sharp, there's going to be a 3/8 inch radius because we're using a 3/4 inch tool. If those have to be a little bit sharper, then we're going to go back and rest machine and remove that up, but at some point there's going to have to be a minimum radius there. And we'll go ahead and accept. And a little bit larger than what we need. Still got the depth in there. Alright, so every time I'm going to stop and take a look at those depths. Minus 1.5, since we know what that number is. And regenerate. So each time I regenerate, I look, do a reality check. Does that make sense? And then we can go to the next one. Alright, one more with the toolpath, new chain. Add another one. We'll go to the ellipse. Grab that one. Change the side. Make sure we're cutting. And then the linking parameters for the depth go to minus 0.75. And regenerate. Alright, so now I've got those cuts at each of the levels. We still would have to finish. And again, anytime I have that 2 inch by 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch chunk, looking at that breaking free, I don't want that to become a projectile. So my options are to leave the step clamp in place and let it retain it. And when I do the changeover, that was what I forgot was the changeover. Alright, so when we go from this side to change clamps after this last operation. Okay, just want to verify. I'm going to bring the insert up so that it's in between. There is what we can find, mill toolpaths, and all the way at the bottom is the manual entry. And I want to have this as a comment or as code. So with a comment, it's going to input the parentheses as code. We're going to give this the G00. Let's go with the G53, Z0, and then end of block. And I'm going to stay with the G00, G53Y0, M00 to stop the machine. And then the comment written in is going to be change clamps. So when we post, that'll be our stop sequence. Send Z home, bring the table forward, and then stop the machine. Expect the operator to change the clamps. When you hit cycle start, goes to the next operation, which would be a duplicate of these two to run material off the other side. Also could put a note in there, either another stop before we do all of the finish operations of let's make sure that we've removed all of those chunks of material out of the way. All right, so that being the case, 6 and 7 and 8 really need to be before 4. So let's see if I can get this messed up. So if I drag 7 up to 4 and then 8 up to 4, we're still got that manual entry. All right, so 8. Nope. I was looking to have that reorder. All right, so reordering has its challenges, mainly because the numbers that we started with just go right back into sequence. So unless we rename these, which probably would have been a good idea before, if I single click and single click, one of these will let us change the comment. Looking for it. Nope. Okay, display. All right, so that was the last one. And then the manual entry would be after that. Okay, and then the contour for the 2 steps. Nope. All right. Okay, so finish pass, and then contour, and somewhere I still have that roughing pass to locate. There we go. All right, so as I toggle those on and off, I can see where they're coming from. All right. So go ahead and at this point you would either copy and change the chains for those 2 items, and then we want to do a little bit of text and the pocket. So I go back to Alt-1, and then under the wireframe, if it came in with text, then you would be dealing with that geometry. And we have create letters, create machinable geometry from text. So what are we going to work with? And true type fonts always go around. Now, if we're trying to just do an engraving, we're looking for a single point. You know, pretty much the true type font is always going to make 2 passes around the text. So if it's just straight geometry, you know, single line geometry, then we're going to have to look for a different font. Horizontal alignment, and then the base point. Let's see. No, don't need any symbols, not loading text. Spacing of 0.2. We'll give it the insert location, and it did put it at the bottom. So Control Z that real quick. Let's see, reselect. We'll bring it back up to the point. Horizontal, top of chain. Let's see, I need to pick that up, and that's going to be all of those guys. Alright, so this did come in as a single point text, so that's not quite going to help me. So after saying that, if we're just doing the engraving, that was the desired result, but we want to actually have an emboss or a deboss here. So create the letters. Just old standby Arial. Alright, so something a little bit more. We can rough position it. I want to say there was a move command. And would like to attach it to that point so I don't lose it. Alright, so we'll transform. Yep, got part of my segment. So that's what I was mentioning about the ellipse. Sees all those little segments. And let's see if we're still in chain. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it wants to do that though. Nope, way too close. Probably should have just positioned it. Okay, not too bad. Probably should have put it out and away from the part a little ways. All right, like that. All right, so there's our center point. And then if I drag that back to the point, all right, lost my tooltip. Oh, from to. All right, select the point to translate from. That was the center. Translate to. Okay. And no, I did not want to join them. I wanted to move them. Okay. So we're always reacting to those fun visual clues. So except for the one line, did pretty good. So let's grab that one in the selection. We'll try that one more time. And from the endpoint, bring it back over to the endpoint. All right, so now we have a situation where we can do the pocket. Everything's on the top level. Know that that's going to be an 1/8 inch deep. There's no way we're getting that sharp of a corner. All right, so we could go ahead and put the fillets in there, or just let it get as close as it can into the V. All right, so normal. Well, if we gave it, let's go a little bit bigger than an 1/8 inch tool. So I know 70. And it left a little bit, but that's okay. Yeah, not quite. But at least it's a little more representative of what we're going to machine. Interesting. I'm sure somewhere our trademark is having a fit. What did you do to our logo? All right, it doesn't stand for MCC anymore. Okay, so on the toolpath then, let's just treat it as a standard pocket. And we're going to pick up the outside geometry. Alright, I do want you to pick up the geometry. We had it set for chain. Yep. Oh, I picked on surfaces. Oops. Okay. Entirely different monster. No, I don't want to keep the operation. So multi 3D pocket. That's pretty much why I don't use those. Is I'm more familiar with the right mouse button. There we go. Let's try that instead. All right, so a chain, and then we also need to accept, select any to start a new chain. Should be able to go all the way around those, and all the way around those. Okay, so if those act as our items, we have the void areas, but not really anything in a model. Select the library tool. Turn on our filter, none, and we're going to pick an eighth inch tool. Still at 4,000, eighth inch deep. Might be able to get away with 6. Depends on how much we go for the step overs. Cut parameters. We're going to finish, not real critical on size, so stock to leave on walls, stock to leave on borders. Helical in, I'll just go ahead and leave the defaults. Z clearance can be a little bit closer. I think that's all okay. We'll leave the finishing pass, lead in, lead out. That's a little bit larger than what I need, but go ahead and set it, and then minus 0.125. So a lot of interesting little cuts and finishes, but that should be able to create our shape, and we'll finish up with simulation. Oh, and at some point, really should save this, since I'm still working without a net. All right, so everything's selected. We're going to go back into the simulation mode. Three hours and 41 minutes. Okay, I don't know that those trochoidal cuts did me any favor. Well, that might also be at 6 inches a minute. All of the cuts around that geometry. All right, but we're still talking about removing what probably 80% of a 11 by 11 by 2 inch thick piece. So that was the one. And actually, I didn't ghost out the first area mill, so it's going back over the same surface and with the dynamic. All right, and since I did not define the what am I thinking of? Since I didn't define the machine, our parameters, I didn't set this as an error operation where it could feed all the way off the part. All right, so now we're seeing the dynamic at the 1.5 inch level. Then we switch back to the contour. All right, so that's going to be kind of screeching going through that little bit of wall. Not perfect, but I don't want to give it all away. No, that's you guys can go in and fine tune it. So interesting that it left just a few little scallops there. All right, so that's almost a rest machining to come up with. All right, so we'll revisit that. Call this one good with a few minor changes.